Hi everybody, it's another Table 13. We're here with Ian from Gehenna Gaming. I, of course, am a wooden leg. Over here is our fabulous Mr. E, and over there is the fabulous Shady Ankle Bottoms. We're here, as I said, with Ian from Gehenna Gaming. And why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction, Ian? What do you guys do? What are you all about?
Right. So, Gehenna Gaming is a horror tabletop experience company, I think is the best way to describe it. Originally, we started off primarily just running games at game shops and conventions, and streaming, just bringing games that we like a lot to the masses. And then that kind of expanded once the pandemic hit primarily, but also we were starting to ramp up before that. And now we also do event management and organization. So we run conventions. We've been running online conventions for the past 6, 7 months.
That's pretty
Um,
cool, yeah.
we do a lot of that. We just finalized the first draft of our first TTRPG work. So we're going to be breaking into that space a little bit. And then obviously we run actual plays. We have a podcast. We do interviews with game developers and creators and a whole bunch of other stuff. Actually, I think it was announced tonight, so I can say it. We're also helping run a Kickstarter for a new game coming out soon. So we're
That's
breaking
awesome.
well.
Yeah,
we,
no
go,
kidding.
we wear many hats across the group as a team, but also as a company. So
So, tell us a little bit about your role in that company. You guys say you have different, you wear different hats. So, what is your responsibilities in Gehenna Gaming itself?
so officially, as I see one of my co-founders in chat, officially I am co-founder and VP of strategy. So
Okay.
strategic partnerships with game publishers and designers and other groups, much like yourself, as well as kind of just the internal strategy of like, okay, what's our focus for this quarter, for this year? What conventions are we going to go to? So operations stuff.
Okay.
I also am our community manager, so I am the kind of the face, uh, for what it's worth, behind the company. I'm kind of our main streamer and Twitch producer,
Okay.
although I've been handing off some of those responsibilities lately to our new Twitch producer and kind of designer, Nick, who's a fantastic guy. And then I help with marketing. I do a lot of our social stuff. If you are tweeting at us, you're either talking to me or Mark, our VP of marketing. Um, and then
Marketing.
I like to pick on him for that, and I think he's in chat, so I get to. And then I also do for some of the behind the scenes stuff we do, like with the writing I mentioned earlier. I do writing. I've been a writer for a very long time. It was actually my career for a while.
hmm
And I'm also the editor for a lot of the stuff we do. So I make the words look nice and pretty on pages. I'm probably forgetting things, but those are the
Oh,
important
yeah,
things.
no,
And I'm
the.
one of our podcast hosts as well. So
I mean, it's you do quite a bit. It sounds like,
Sounds
yeah,
like, yeah.
yeah. We
we
were
all
talking.
do. I mean, we're a 3-person team at the core, and then we've expanded to 2 more. We have a guy who primarily just focuses on running games and being like a machine. Just he will run. He will not take breaks at conventions and run for 12 hours straight.
Oh my goodness.
Oh boy.
And then
Madness.
Nick, who I mentioned, is our Twitch producer, and then there's Mark and Rick, the other 2 co-founders.
Well, awesome. Nice to have you guys here. Nice to have you on camera, and then some of the rest of the crew in chat here. So and you guys also, so we are primarily Table 13. We're primarily focused on DMing as well as producing stories of for people, or not necessarily producing stories on Table 13, obviously, but more of a way to get DMs the tools and the tips that they need to construct successful games in a variety of systems using a variety of DM strategies. And you said a little bit before the show that you were a dungeon master yourself as well. That's one of
Yep.
your responsibilities, I suppose you could say, within Gehenna Gaming.
Oh yeah.
So you guys, as Gehenna Gaming, you guys do a lot of different systems. And
We
that's
do.
pretty cool because a lot of people that we have on here sometimes are a little bit system like monolithic. They only play one type, or they're only really interested in one type. But you guys I wrote a little list here of the stuff that I've seen you guys do on your website. And it's Vampire the Masquerade, Call of the Cthulhu, Chronicles of Darkness, Cult Divinity Lost, Dread, Ten Candles, D&D Ravencroft. And you say you have even, there's like a, and even more, tagline at the bottom there. So, as a DM who has had a lot of experience with these kinds of systems in this horror genre, not you don't have to go through each one, obviously, but like, what are some things in systems that lend themselves well to horror storytelling, and what are some things that you find in systems that almost detract from horror storytelling? Um, yeah, yeah. Just as a start off the conversation.
So obviously, I think most people understand there are tabletop games that are designed for horror,
Right.
quote unquote. World of Darkness, Call of Cthulhu, Chronicles of Darkness, Ten Candles, Dread are some of the standouts there, in my opinion. The mechanics are designed to lend themselves to telling stories about either suspense, terror, body horror, things of that nature, or
Mm-hmm.
they are more focused on building personal horror, which
Okay.
is what World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness specialize in, which is a horror that speaks to the background of the character.
Okay.
Hopefully, not the player.
Right.
We try to avoid lead there, but I think that beyond that, games that focus on narrative role playing versus more mechanically focused role playing or dungeon crawls or things like that tend to be better for horror because
Okay.
you are collaborating on telling a story. That's
Right.
what in most tabletop games, I think any tabletop game is a collaborative storytelling tool. So you're trying to work with the players as a GM to tell a story together.
Right.
A game that is entirely focused on rolling dice and swinging a sword is much harder to tell a horror story in than a game that is about interacting with NPCs and other players and going through a mystery or solving a supernatural event.
Okay.
I think that's really the crux of it. It's are you telling a story or are you narrating a tale?
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And
I feel like
yeah. Go on,
I
Brett.
feel like yeah, something where it's more mechanically based. It doesn't give you as much power as a GM to produce the scenarios or situations that you're able to really pull that kind of feeling of helplessness or or whatever you're trying to reach for in horror. Um, you're playing a war simulator at that point.
Right.
You're playing 40K.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Although
absolutely.
I will say 40K lends itself well to horror if you're playing it right.
Right.
We just wrapped a Warhammer Wrath and Glory stream,
Oh,
which
interesting.
was very drenched in horror to a certain degree. Although the players were killing machines, but they were playing evil characters. They were
Okay.
bad people.
Oh,
So that's
interesting.
kind of where the horror came from. It came from the viewing experience rather than
Right.
the experience the players were having.
Okay.
That's interesting. That is an interesting, I guess, like dichotomy that I guess I hadn't thought about. Is that you can have, especially in this kind of theater where we're producing these role playing stories for people to consume as watchable media. There is that like, are we running this campaign to scare ourselves, or are we running this campaign to scare our audience members? Do you like consider
Right.
that as streamers or as producers of content? How or is it more focused on like scaring ourselves, and by scaring ourselves we'll scare the audience?
It varies from GM to GM. The
Okay.
games I run, it's definitely the latter. I'm trying to tell a scary story with my players. And if that also is an entertaining, scary story for the audience, that's a win.
Okay.
Everyone has different levels of what frightens them.
Right.
So I think part of the trick there is curating that. But ultimately, there's a huge difference between running a game at a table and running a game for a stream.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into a stream game that you don't have to worry about when you're at the table.
Mm-hmm.
So,
like all this machinery that's in front of me right now.
Yeah.
I just need a
massive
bag
rig
of
of electronics
Yeah,
I have on my face right now. Yeah.
it's cooking my skin. It's just that's really interesting. So going back to like my original question is like the narrative over the story thing. Because like systems, like role playing systems themselves need to have a set of mechanics, or you're just a group of people telling a story in a circle. What types of mechanics do you find to be the most successful over others? Because you mentioned like the mechanics is like 5e does not really lend itself to horror
No,
in combat because it's like it turns into math equations.
it does.
Or and like there's like I'm really into Stephen King, and I've read like his
Hmm.
on writing and his dance macabre kind of stories, and he says
Hmm.
like the scariest thing is a closed door with something unknown behind it. Once you
Right.
open the door, it's not scary anymore. And
Hmm.
5e has a lot of like kind of, oh, its AC is 16 now that we know
Right.
that like this and this and this and this. So whereas like I'm just now learning Dungeon World,
Yep.
which is powered by the Apocalypse game, and I can just already feel myself being like, oh yeah, I can do a lot more like scary stuff or like dreadful stuff because everyone is so weak and monsters don't have to be as defined as like, oh, his
Hmm.
attack power is 150, his HP is 153 and whatever. So tying all this rambling thing up with a question mark at the end, what in your experience are some mechanical bits that do lend itself more? Like I don't know enough to be like, oh yeah, these are the things in this system that are going to make it be the case. But do you have anything that you could point a finger at?
Answer your question by answering a different question first.
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Please.
So systemically, I think so. We just did D&D as a company for the first time in
Okay.
October.
Oh
We've been
wow.
around for 2 years
Was
up
that
until then.
Ravencroft?
No, we actually did the Red Opera, which
Oh. Okay.
we did it as part of the promotion for the Kickstarter. We had one of the main writer of the game come on and run it for us, which was amazing.
Nice.
Very cool.
And it was actually my first time playing fifth edition. Well, second time playing fifth edition. Because for us, D&D is not scary. Like the
Right.
only you just keep throwing, like you can throw horrible monsters at people, but like you're killing machines.
Right.
You're on your way to godhood as a D&D player character. So it's hard to build, but you can build tension and horror through the way you tell a story, but not through the system mechanics.
Right.
Unless you're a ridiculous like person who knows those things,
Yeah.
which is not me. Um, for me, systems like the Storyteller system for World of Darkness or the Story Path system, which they came from Beyond the Grave and they came from Beneath the Sea uses. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They're Onyx Path publishing games. Or Powered by the Apocalypse. Cult Divinity Lost uses a modified version of Powered by the Apocalypse, and that is probably one of the best games for telling a terrifying story, in my opinion.
Interesting.
10 Candles uses d6s. You just roll d6s. It's a shared dice pool between all the players. It's
Oh.
the most simplistic system in the world because the mechanics don't really matter in that game. Well, they do, and I can explain why. The best game to explain how to drive horror through mechanics is Dread,
Okay.
because the system mechanics are a Jenga tower.
I've seen there was Will Wheaton played it on.
Yep. You, instead of rolling dice, you pull a block. And if
Oh.
the tower falls, your character dies.
Oh. Interesting.
It builds tension and dread so quickly and you can start with like a bunch of blocks already pulled too. It builds that tension and suspense so fast, just because you have to pull a block. And the
Right.
tower might fall. You just don't know, because that's the nature of Jenga. Like in a lot of dice rolling, there's ways around these things. 10 Candles is the next best one, I think, quote unquote best, because you have a shared dice pool, and as you go through the game, you lose dice.
Okay.
Only sixes are successes. So it just reduces the dice pool as you go through the game until you're only rolling one die by the end of it. So that it's a kind of this loss mechanic. Like you're losing your ability to succeed, which is very interesting. But
Yeah.
you go into that game knowing your character is going to die, so there's not like I mean, I can talk about this later, but like, there's a whole side of horror about consent and safety mechanics and
Right.
things. Which
I do want to go over that too. Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. But yeah, those are my two that I think mechanically tell a horror story. The other ones can be used in many different ways. I think the most versatile, crunchy mechanical system that I know, in my opinion, is what the BRP system that Call of Cthulhu uses. Because it's just, you roll a percentile. Everything is a percentage. So you can adapt that very easily for different games. But mechanically, it's not horror. Like, they have the sanity system, which I'm not a huge fan of for various reasons.
Yeah.
But it tells a story. You tell a story, and then you use the mechanics to lend itself to survivability for the characters, essentially. I think, to answer your actual question, I don't think, other than in niche cases like 10 Candles and Dread, mechanics aren't what drives a horror game.
Right. Okay.
Ever.
Interesting.
It's the collaborative story that you're telling with the players.
Neat.
In all cases. And sometimes it's not even you as the DM. Sometimes it's the players interacting. Cattail. It's the way the players are interacting. I've run games where I just sat back and let things happen for hours and barely said anything. There's a stream game you can watch on our YouTube for They Came From Beyond the Sea. I barely say anything for the first hour and a half of that game, and it's one of the best games I've ever run.
That's really cool. I mean, that's like, that kind of like shows the hand of the DM there is kind of mechanical ideas. The less you have to do, the better a job you're doing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's interesting. And it does seem like the Dread and the 10 Candles, like what you described, is that limited pool of resources, or it's a resource that allows you to continue playing that is like unknown how long it will last. Whereas like in D&D, your HP and everything, you know you're going to get that back at a short rest. Or you know you're going to get your spells back at a long rest. You know that these monsters and stuff, that they've got limited HP, that all you have to do is pip away at them until they're gone. Whereas in these, the horrors and things, they don't have HP. You know, they don't have like a health pool that, you know, that if you just cast enough fireballs at, you'll reduce it to 0 and win the monster. So that's really interesting. And yeah, you have such a breadth of experience with role-playing role-playing games. How many games do you think that you've run a game for? How many? Systems. Yeah, how many systems do you think you've run at least one game in?
Hold on, let me dig back through the ages first.
Yeah, right.
I started with Advanced D&D, then I played 3.0, and I played 3.5. I played Werewolf, Vampire the Masquerade, Chronicles of Darkness. They Came From Beneath the Sea, They Came From Beyond the Grave, which is the same system. Dread, 10 Candles, Hunter, 4E, 5E, Pathfinder. I think Pathfinder First Edition. Cult, Great American Witch, Midnight World.
I love you remember one and then it opens up like 3 more. Like,
that's right.
I think of an event. Like, I think of an event, and I'm like, okay, what did I run? What did I play during that event? I honestly, I don't know. I posted a photo of my shelf, which is I have a couple massive IKEA bookshelves because I'm a book collector. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention Call of Cthulhu, which is my favorite game. Monster Hearts 2. That's good. Someone pointed that out in chat because I played it with them. But like, I have 2 shelves full of books, and it's not, it's like, doesn't even have my most recent Kickstarters on it. Those are over here. Wow. That I'm still like reading. And I haven't even played all of them. Oh, Alien. That's another one. That's actually, so that's why I want to circle back to your original question. So yeah, I can, and I'm losing track at that point. I played a lot of games.
Yeah, no.
But some of them only once. Because either I liked it, but I haven't had a chance to play it again.
Right.
Vaesen and Forbidden Lands. And just thinking,
Just
really
for the next hour and a half, if you remember a system you haven't mentioned, just be like, oh,
yeah.
right. And then, yeah.
Mechanics that lend themselves to horror. I actually just thought of a couple.
Sure.
In Alien, you have a stress mechanic.
Oh, okay.
So as things get more difficult, you replace your dice pool with stress dice, which can cause bad things to happen. That's really useful. In Vampire the Masquerade, you have two mechanics. You have your hunger, which as that increases, it increases the risk of things going wrong, whether you are successful or not, which is fantastic.
Interesting, yeah.
And that's a new mechanic for the 5th edition of Vampire, which I can talk about in detail if you like, or I can gloss over. And then, what's the other one I was trying to think of? And then they also have humanity, and you can perform, if you even accidentally perform horrible acts because you're a monster, you lose humanity and you dive deeper into that monstrousness and lose touch with society and the people in your life, the humans in your life who are still have it. So that helps drive personal horror. And all of the World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness games have similar mechanics to that. So they all have something similar to humanity, but not necessarily the same. And those work really well as well for driving horror. So there are a few mechanical ways to induce it. But if your players aren't into that, they're like, I want to be a monster, I'm just going to murder everything.
Right.
Like, it doesn't work. Yeah. So that's why I stress that it's about the story you're telling.
Yeah. And there does seem to be almost some common themes too with a lot of these systems. Is like there is like a stress or a sanity or some kind of like meter to show the depth of the session that you've gone through, which is interesting.
The depth of the horror, or the depth of how deep you've gone into what is inhuman,
right?
Essentially,
right. Sort of like a place to inject conflict of some variety. Like you were saying, there's like, chance of failure, or the Jenga tower. Like, even if you're just
That's
like,
really cool.
whatever you're making that check for, you might knock the whole thing over and die with any of those acts. Like, I think that's another thing that's really interesting, is that sort of lack of control over sort of the impact your actions have on the situation. You can have a certain amount of input, but there's still this other bit that's like kind of beyond what you're you're able to really rein in, which I think that's an interesting element of horror as well. Is there's that loss of control thing is the helplessness is interesting. That's like a fun way to try and engender that in the players and stuff.
I think the neat thing about it is the external factor. It sort of almost subconsciously puts your players in that mode of anxiety without actually, nothing from the actual story or narrative is producing that. It's from the mechanics, and then it helps them kind of bring that to the table, bring that to the narrative, in a less like direct, forced way.
Right. So coming back to what you said earlier, you said Call of Cthulhu was your favorite system. Is that what I heard?
People have been telling me I really need to play the Gumshoe system, which I've never played. Trail or the Pelgrane Press release of Cthulhu Mythos games. Sadly, I'm working on it. I need to pick up the Yellow King bundle that they have, which you commented earlier. My avatar on Discord is the Yellow King, King in Yellow. So yeah, the Yellow King in Yellow, not the Yellow King. But I really I grew up really, actually, see my shirt. I have Lovecraft fighting Poe on my shirt. For his faults, because Lovecraft was a massive racist.
Yes.
I adore the way he tells horror.
Mm-hmm.
I like cosmic horror. It's one of my favorite genres of subgenres of horror. I like when it blends into other genres like body horror, like in the movies like The Void or even The Thing. But I think that the system mechanics marry so well with telling stories like that Call of Cthulhu is kind of the penultimate game for me.
Cool.
It can be better. I'm actually working on homebrewing a variant on sanity and turning it into more of a stress mechanic.
Okay.
Just because there's some ableism issues with how Call of Cthulhu handles sanity. but and I'm kind of stealing from games like Alien, which uses stress so well, and just kind of basically giving the players a stress meter, and as it builds, it increases the risk of things going horribly wrong.
Right.
Also, it's essentially because what Call of Cthulhu wants to do. So, I mean, this is a bit of a tangent.
No, please.
Is they want to measure your character's grasp on reality, which is perfectly fine. How they execute it isn't, and that's what I'm trying to improve on, and hopefully I can. I'm going to be playing around with that a little bit on Saturday. I'm actually running a one shot of Call of Cthulhu.
Cool.
So.
All right. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah. I guess like kind of segueing a little bit away from the mechanics here of the system, going into I guess a little bit. You mentioned ableism in Call of Cthulhu and how there is a little bit of that inherent in the systems. Vague segue around that. We did talk about a little bit how in horror you can kind of approach on subjects that some people may find disturbing or upsetting, and especially in a convention kind of scenario where you have a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds you don't know very well, and you're going to try to present some kind of horrible story to them. So what are some steps that you take in order to not upset role players, or to make sure that you yourself are protected in those kind of situations? Because I know that we have some DM or some prospective dungeon masters who are a little bit worried about presenting subject matter, even in non-horror games, that they're worried about. So what would your advice be to these new DMs?
Sure. This is gonna be a while. This is actually one of the cornerstones of our company. It's one of the things we founded it on, which is consent in gaming and safety mechanics, and making players feel safe and comfortable telling horrible stories and being horrible people, quote unquote. First off, use the tools that are available to you. Everyone can use an X card. If you're not familiar with an X card, it's a card that has an X on it, and if something is coming up in the game that makes you uncomfortable, you hold it up. Index card and a black Sharpie, you have an X card. You can do an X with your hands. For streaming, doing this is very noticeable, so that gets people's attention. There's a lot of ways to do that. You can discuss lines and veils ahead of time. I'm actually not super familiar with that particular safety mechanic, so I don't want to go into too much detail on it and make an ass out of myself. But I can swear on here, right?
Yeah. Oh yes, please.
But it's essentially like, here are the things that I want to not be involved at all, and here are the things like I'm okay if it comes up, but let's not go into detail, or I don't want to talk into my character, sort of stuff. And then what we use, especially in a convention setting, is we just use a consent form. It's 2 pages, and we apologize for that because it does take a minute to fill out, but it's 2 pages of, here is every potential triggering, and I use that word in a positive sense,
right,
topic that could come up in any game ever. Like we have a rule, like rape and sexual assault don't happen in any of our games, regardless, unless like it's a private game that people are running on like our Discord server, and everyone has said they're fine with that.
Right.
That being a topic that comes up, like that's not going to happen to our players in any game,
Right.
but it's on there because what if another player brings it up? The GM needs to know, hey, I'm going to stop right now because someone else at this table is not okay with that being involved. So every topic under the sun, from transphobia to are you afraid of spiders, is on this consent form, and it's evolving. We've actually changed it a couple times since we initially started using it, but it's modeled after Monty Cook's consent in gaming form, which is a free download, and I highly encourage people to check out, which you can use for any game under the sun. Ours is customized to focus on horror games, so it's more focused on horror topics. We removed some stuff from the Monty Cook thing and added a bunch. We ask people. It's a simple red light, yellow light, green light system.
Okay.
Don't want it in the game, mark it as red. If you're okay with it being in the game, but like don't be overly descriptive, or just be aware that I might get uncomfortable. If I start, try to be aware that I might be uncomfortable about it, yellow light. Perfectly fine with it, green light. And then we ask players to say, like, use the movie ranking system. What type of content are you okay with? PG, because telling a G-rated horror game is a little tricky. Although PG to NC-17.
All right.
So we use that. Everyone has to fill one out if they want to play in a game with us. No exceptions. You have to fill it out, even if you just draw a line down the green. At least you looked at it, told me that you're okay with everything, and handed it back to me. We also use it as consent for like mailing lists and things like that when we use it at conventions. So it's like, please put your email if you want us to reach out to you, sort of stuff.
Right.
But
Right.
it's that simple. Like, and I know consent in gaming has been a really hot button topic for a lot of people lately.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked with experts in safety mechanics and consent about this. We've talked to the people who have written the chapters on it in books. The simple fact of the matter is, it makes you a better storyteller because you have to think more about the story you're telling.
Right.
And worst case scenario, you look at someone and say, this is not the game for you. Like, you're not going to be comfortable playing this game. And that could be the game itself. We've had people come in and redline things that are like pretty essential to what Cult Divinity Lost is all about. They're like, I don't want any religious overtones in my game. And we're like,
the name of the game
that's going to be tricky with this one.
Right.
Let's talk about that. Or Vampire the Masquerade is a really great example. A lot of, there's a discipline in Vampire the Masquerade called Dominate. And you mind control people, and that can happen to the players. And if someone says loss of player agency or mind control or gaslighting is completely off the table, it's like, let me explain to you how this power works before we start, because it's difficult to remove unless I remove numerous types of vampire clans from this game. So, and then often 9 times out of 10, the player's response is, oh, that's fine. I just would prefer it doesn't happen to me. Or like, I understand it's like them saying sit and I have to, and then I have control of myself again. It's not like them making me do horrible things and I have no choice. Or like, so worst case scenario, you have to look at a player and say, I don't think this is the game for you. You should, let me see if there's another table. If you're doing it at a convention, let me see if I can seat you at another table that we have going, or, I'm sorry. Come back later. We'll see you and get you into another game.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you did talk about on your podcast too the importance of a session 0, and that kind of comes into a lot of what you're saying here. It's like without a session 0, you can't prepare yourself and your role players for the story that you're about to tell them. So what are some things that you recommend in a session 0 beyond just having them fill out the consent forms?
Yeah. So a full session 0 is really, a long form campaign thing that you're going to sit down with the players before you actually start with. I usually recommend doing character creation as a group during it. Because even if you want to hide things as a player, like which happens a lot in Vampire, you don't want all the players knowing your secrets. You can just pull the GM aside and talk to them. But ultimately, it's about talking about what you want to get out of the game and what type of story that you want to tell as a group. And it's a conversation.
Right.
That's all it is. Parts of it can be private, like if you don't want people to know that you're afraid of spiders, but you want the GM to not bring it up, you have a consent form. You can fill that out, give it to them. You don't have to tell the other players. The GM can just skirt around it if it comes up in game, or avoid it entirely. But the rest of it is a conversation as a group about what you're looking to get out of it, what you don't want to experience, and any game will be more fun by doing that, in my opinion.
I think I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like we said, I think it does a good thing for the hobby as itself. If you have a bunch of people that have bad experiences with bad DMs, I mean, I'm subscribed to the Reddit thread or the Reddit subreddit RPG horror stories, and they're not. They're stories about horrible experiences at tables by either players or DMs. And a lot of the time I see the problem there is a lack of consent or a lack of communication on either the player or the DM's part. And, we as people who are very invested in this hobby really want people to have a good time and want people to feel safe and accepted in a circle of people while still having the freedom to tell a story. It's like you said, it's sometimes it's restrictive in terms of like, your red lines are going to make it harder to run this system. So you should look for a game that's not quite in the system. yeah, and that way you don't have to get 2 or 3 sessions into a game and then find out that you're not going to be able to run it with this player.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's incredibly important, and really does speak to, like, like just communication and consent are paramount in any activity where you have a lot of people in a group.
Especially in horror games.
Yeah.
Especially,
for sure.
sadly, running games that are known for having a lot of edgelords involved.
Right.
Either historically or currently. I don't want to
That's fair.
throw names and groups of people under the bus, but
Right.
a lot of the horror games attract those types of people.
Well, you're dealing with
and,
the edgier topic and edgier
Right.
genre.
Yeah, and there are people who go into it like, no, I want this game to be blood and guts and gore and demons ripping people apart and entrails everywhere 24/7, and I'm like, I can run that game. I have no problem running that game. Does everyone else at the table want that?
Right.
Right.
And it's, I said it, I hinted at it, someone said it in chat. It makes you a better GM and storyteller, in my opinion,
Right.
because you are challenged. I have run games at a table with 4 adults and a 13-year-old.
Right.
And it was one of the better games I ran. The 13-year-old almost killed his father. It was amazing.
That's great.
But I had to think about it for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I had to curate the game I was running a little bit more carefully. Also my language, because I have the mouth of a sailor.
Oh yeah, me too.
Then his dad said "fuck," and I was like, "All right, I don't give a shit anymore."
All right, we're good.
That's great.
So it was like, I like a challenge, and I think that having to think a little bit more about how I'm running a game and how I'm going to present creepy, scary topics will make me a better storyteller in the long run, because it'll help me be more innovative and help me improvise better in the future.
So let's talk about the art of telling a story in a role-playing system with a group of people, because and I'm gonna I hold everyone down at least once that I talk to and give my spiel on this, but I do think that role-playing games are another form of storytelling apart from movies or novels or plays, in that they're just as different of a storytelling medium as any of those other storytelling mediums, and they have similarities. So, in terms of writing a story for a campaign, regardless if it's horror or adventure or whatever, there are certain, like steps that you take to develop a story before you even sit down at the table. So for you, someone who's really into telling the horror aspect of stories in the role-playing sphere, what are some things that you do to begin to plan to tell one of these stories? Like, is there a system that you have? Like, if you were to sit down and say, I'm going to run a one-shot in this system, how would you prepare the story?
That is a good question. It's not so much a secret anymore, but it used to be. My games are more than 50% improvised.
Yes,
on the
what
fly.
I do too. Yeah.
If I'm telling a one shot, I will draft the majority of it. I will outline the story from beginning to end, kind of like you would outline an essay or a short story or a novel.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the plot hooks and the bullet points, and that's about it.
Yep.
That way, if the players deviate, I don't. That way, I don't have to railroad in order to tell the story I want to tell. If they deviate, I can figure out a way to loop them back in towards how I wanted it to end.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about as much prep as I do. I usually have a single sheet. So we usually run about 3-hour games, sometimes 4. I usually have one sheet of paper with an outline on it and bullet points, and that's it. And then some character sheets for NPCs if I need them.
Right. Depending on the system you're using.
For any system. One reason I like 10 Candles is it's a 0 prep system.
Okay. How does that work?
So essentially, the way 10 Candles works is it's the most collaborative of storytelling, because the players actually get to introduce truths into the world as you go through the game. So I guide the story, but they're making all the decisions. I basically say the premise of 10 Candles is 10 days ago the sky went dark, and they came. So you put the players somewhere and you let them make decisions, and you go from there. But like the players actually get to help develop what they are, and they are like, well, when we get to the next town up ahead, there's going to be a gun. We know that, and that becomes a truth in the world. And I just weave the story around it. It's a great game. You basically do about 10 minutes of prep, and that's it.
That's really cool.
Or 7 hour, yeah, I know. We run some long one shots.
We've been there too,
yeah. But for a game like Vampire or D&D or something like that, you do need a little bit more prep. You have to create NPCs. For a campaign, I do a lot more work. I will spend weeks, if not months, creating NPCs, building the city or the town or the world. I will build maps. I will draft different things. I will make all my character. We'll do our session 0 well before we actually start the game, because I'll get all my characters' backstories and I'll incorporate those into the world. And then I stop planning from there, and I improv all of my sessions.
Nice. That seems to be a common thread. Yeah.
I usually, once I've built the world that I want to run the game for and created like the story hook, I basically create an overarching story and mini stories going on for different NPCs. So all the NPCs have their own mini backstories and things. Thinking specifically of Vampire, because that's what I've run most recently a long form campaign in. And then I start the game. I do about an hour or 2 of prep before each session, which is mostly just reading over the notes from the previous session and figuring out what the NPCs would have been doing when the players weren't interacting with them. And that's it. And then I run the game and I see what the players want to do.
That's awesome.
It's about all you can do, right? Because, in sessions, and I found this out last night when my party decided they were going to weekend at Bernie's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A person they killed on their spaceship.
All of a sudden, everybody's concerned now about this murder. By the way, 3 months ago when it happened, nobody cared. Tonight, everybody's pissed.
What is this, Traveler?
Yeah.
I'm familiar with Traveler.
He came down and spotted them on a space station that they were trying to hide from the passengers on the ship, and so Eric's character clubbed him and gave him a lethal dose of some kind of amphetamine or something, and killed him. And he's a famous rock star. Like, this guy's got people. He's not just nobody. So yeah, they've got a whole plan for him now.
But he's not a doctor. He didn't brew up that hot dose. Okay.
Wonderful. Nice.
But yeah,
nice.
It's really, that kind of stuff happens pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So you make the world, you create the factions, people, all that stuff, create an overarching theme, and then everything from there is running one shots that are based off the last one shot, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Make a nice sandbox and let them screw around in it.
Yeah.
Try and get some threads connected from one session to the next every once in a while if you can. That's usually my strategy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I think that's one of the reasons I stopped playing D&D so much is D&D. It's a great system to learn how to play role-playing games in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell amazing stories and more advanced stories as well, but it tends to be very linear, especially the pre-written stuff. It's very railroaded. And a lot of people just push it that way. And I'm like, that's not how I want to tell stories.
Yeah.
And I haven't run D&D in a long time actually, but I've played in it and I've played in great games. But long-term campaigns, it's not really the game. That's not really the system that I enjoy playing in anymore.
Yeah. People are trying to get me to get off of 5e because I don't run games like a 5e game.
I'm realizing I don't either. That's why.
Yeah, right.
That's why I was like, man, we should all be looking at it, because I drag around 80% of D&D that I don't really use most sessions.
Right.
And there's no reason.
So.
But and there are some really interesting mechanics that happen when you get that interplay between the players' sort of direct agency in the world, not just like, oh yeah, this is a bit of my background and about the people where I'm from. It's like, yeah, in this town up there's a gun. It's like, oh, okay, there is now. Like, all right, let me figure out where it is. Like, and that's fun. That's my favorite part about DMing, is trying to like juggle.
Yeah. Improvise on the fly and adapt to what the players are doing.
Yes. That's the biggest strength I think a DM can have, is the ability to improvise a storyline as players are building one.
Well, you mentioned earlier, you were saying, running a tabletop game, DMing a tabletop game is a different type of media from movies and books. I think the thing it's most similar to is improv.
Yes.
Because it's a collaborative story that the players are contributing to as they go. No other medium is like that. Even stage plays, you're telling someone else's story as actors, unless it's improv. So, and I think it's better improv, but that's a personal opinion and choice.
Yeah.
A whole lot of the same rules apply. The yes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I
I
think
actually, one of the when people say, like, how can I be a better GM? I'm like, take an improv class. Even if you don't like improv, you will be a better GM by taking an improv class.
Absolutely.
And something growing up, it's like, man, if I had realized how connected these things were when I was running around high school with my D&D books, I would have been all over drama and stuff.
I was a theater kid.
Yeah, it's like, I get it. It was just that wasn't like, my thing at the time. And now it's like, man, that was a silly waste. I would have so many good opportunities
so much
to get better
now.
at this.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is around the 11:15 mark where we're going to take our 15-minute break. We'll be back. Shady, if you want to play us out in your hilarious style.
Why do you gotta do this to me, bro?
I know, every time.
Because
it's a tradition.
We have to do it, and then we mess it up.
And then we get made fun of rather than getting to make fun of you. Yes.
Well, guys, everybody here, thanks for joining. Thanks for hanging out and being cool. Before I give any spiel about our stuff, Ian, where can we find you? Where can we learn about Gehenna Gaming and all of that?
Very simply by going to gehennagaming.com. GEHENNA gaming.com. You can find a ton of information on what we do and all of the cool stuff we've done in the past on our website. You can also find links to our Discord channel, our Twitter, our Facebook, our YouTube, our Twitch, our Patreon, our merch shop. So yeah, and you can find me online as Ravnos, RAVNOS, on most places where Ravnoses are found.
And we are Rational Radio, which some of you already know. Our Discord information is below the whole screen thing here, as well as our website. We run this weekly on Thursdays. We do we're sort of in between campaigns at the moment. We're currently going to be doing a weekly Monster of the Week game until the new Dungeon World, which I guess we haven't announced as a Dungeon World game, starts on Mondays. It's currently in construction, under construction. We know for sure next Monday is going to be Monster of the Week. But you'll get some more Marsh Kennedy out of me and my horrible Southern accent. We also do a bi-weekly podcast called Dragons of Paralandia, which you can find anywhere you find podcasts at. That will drop not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow.
Yep.
It'll be our 28th episode?
28th episode, yeah, part
it's
1.
A big episode too.
Yeah, 28 part 1.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the finale of season 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, season 1's going
other
back.
than that, if you like to give money as much as we like to receive it, you can come to our Patreon and give us money. There's rewards there and things of that nature. You can also subscribe to us here on Twitch, which is also awesome. Also, yeah, go check out Gehenna Gaming on Twitch as well. They do all sorts of cool stuff on Twitch. I don't know if there's. I'll pop a link to your Twitch in here too.
It's twitch.tv/Gehenna Gaming.
Perfect.
And we will be back in 13.728 minutes.
Yep. Precisely. All right.
Look at your face, man, every time.
And we're back, everybody. Hi. We're here with Ian from Gehenna Gaming. We've been talking about all sorts of things, from how to build a horror story to the importance of consent in DMing and role-playing games, as well as a few jokes at everyone's expense here and there. So we want to kind of get into a little bit about Gehenna Gaming with the last 25 minutes here that we have. We kind of talked about it during the break. What is the background of the company that you run? How did you guys get started in running entire conventions for horror gaming?
Sure. It's a bit of a slog, so bear with me. We've done a lot in the 2.5 years we've been around. So we originally started as kind of a hobby group for Vampire the Masquerade. They had just announced 5th edition, and we got together and we're like, we want to do something cool for this. We had a bunch of people playing in a home game together who were all also GMs. So we were like, let's do something cool. Let's break up our home game and all run a game in 5th edition when it comes out and make it a shared universe. So all these games are happening in New England, which we all live in. And people who are playing in them can just like bounce between games, and it all takes place in the same new World of Darkness, New England. So we did that for a couple months. It didn't go amazing. It was a bold concept. We did one big crossover game where the people doing our Salem by Night game and my game, the Providence by Night game, got together and we did a massive event for like 8 hours one night, and that was awesome. But from there, we had some membership lineup changes. Yeah, just a cattail waving around.
Yeah, it's adorable. It helps.
We had some membership shakeups, and then Mark, our VP of marketing, came in around actually right at that event. That's where we met him at, and we kind of just were like, we've got like smart people working in this. Like, let's do something cooler than just like a V5 game. So we started thinking about other games we want to run, other systems, other things we want to do, and we had already started the Discord as just kind of a way to get players interacting with each other, and international people started joining it, people from across the United States, France, Brazil, to Indonesia. So we just kind of built up from there. Started running games online. I started streaming on Twitch. We talked about doing a podcast for a really long time before we actually launched it. And at one point, we were like, let's start running games locally just for people. We did that a little bit. And then PAX Unplugged, that was most of basically October 2018 until November 2019. Well, September-ish, because we had to plan for it. And then PAX Unplugged was coming up, and we were like, why don't we run games at PAX? Let's do it. So we submitted. I knew someone who worked in the tabletop thing, so we had a little bit of a connection there. And I was like, hey, we want to run Vampire. Paradox isn't going to be there doing it, but Modifius isn't going to be there doing it. Let's run Vampire 5th edition. So we ran 4 games a day, 3-hour games, 6 people, all 3 days. It was the most beautiful disaster I've ever done in my life. I think it was amazing. I slept like 3 hours a night. We were out hanging out with people after the con every single night. We met a ton of really cool people. I met Jason Carl, who runs LA by Night and is one of the members. It works for Paradox. We met a bunch of the really cool people over at Onyx Path there. They invited us out to hang out, and it kind of blew up from there. We made some really good connections to the industry, which helped, and we just started deciding to do more cool things. So from there, we started planning 2020 as a massive convention year. We were going to do pretty much every gaming convention in New England and run games at it. We were going to branch out and start working with different publishers to run their games for them at cons. And we did PAX East and ran Call of Cthulhu and Vampire the Masquerade. And that was in March.
Wow. Yep.
And then we haven't done a convention since,
Yep.
except for our own. From there, we actually very, very quickly, in like a 2-week span, we organized Virtual Horror Con, which is apparently, we found out, the first online horror tabletop convention. It was a charity event we did to raise money for COVID relief.
Nice.
We ran we got a ton of people to come on and talk about their expertise in horror gaming, industry folks, actors, voice actors, people from all over. And ran a ton of really cool panels, ran actual plays throughout it, had people come in and demo their tabletop games for us, which we played some really neat indie games doing. That was an awesome success. We raised like $7,000 for COVID relief for the World Health Organization, and then that kind of snowballed into publishers being like, "Hey, the pandemic's not ending anytime soon. Normally, we make most of our money at conventions, and we can't do that right now, so we want to run one. You guys just ran a really cool one. Help us run one." We've done 2 of those now.
Nice.
That's very cool.
That's really cool.
Since then, which has been, it's been a learning experience to a degree. I also have a background in marketing and event marketing, so that's been very helpful. But the online part of it has been an interesting bit of chaos in the mix.
Right.
From there, and then we run games online. We obviously have a ton of actual play content. We have basically a stream going every night of the week at this point. I think except for Fridays, and that's about to change. We've started doing we like to go for variety and diversity, so we've got an LGBTQIA only game that just wrapped actually tonight.
Nice.
And we're rolling into another one. We're helping organize a Kickstarter for one of our community members to market and sell his game, which is called Ace Adventures, which is really cool. That's going to be starting up on Friday nights soon. We're going to be doing some one-shot throughout the length of the Kickstarter for that. We have an ongoing Monster Hearts 2 game, which is like a teen monster high school horror game. It's very interesting.
Okay.
That just started season 2, so we have tons of actual play content as well, and then our podcast and all that fun stuff. But it's really like running games for people online, promoting cool games that we like, or people who paid us to help promote their games. And then also we're starting to delve into writing content. Like I said, we finished the first draft of a one-shot that we wrote for a horror D&D scenario.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So I'm probably forgetting stuff.
But that was the important
we
bit,
do
right?
We do a lot.
With all that
we're doing
going
more.
on,
Yeah, absolutely.
Once the pandemic ends, hopefully early next year, we'll get back into the convention circuit, running games at cons, as well as one thing that we really want to get into is doing workshops. So here's a day of seminars and training things for like running better games, how to incorporate safety tools into your games, how to tell horror stories, because that can be very challenging. All of that sort of stuff. So that's a project we want to get into, as well as just running games at local game stores again. It's fun, and we miss doing it. And more stuff. Expanding our Twitch programming, improving our podcast as we go, things like that. So
nice. So there is one more question here around the founding of Gehenna Gaming, the name. Why you said you promised us a story here. Why is it called Gehenna Gaming?
So I will pat myself on the back and totally not humble brag. I come up with the name. Gehenna Gaming. So we started as a Vampire the Masquerade hobby group, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Gehenna is a very important concept in Vampire the Masquerade. It's the vampire's apocalypse. It's when the end times come for kindred, which is what vampires call themselves if you're not familiar. It's very mysterious. It could be caused by a wide variety of things, but it's essentially the elder vampires, not the elder because that's a term, the oldest vampires awakening from their slumber in the earth or wherever they are and just devouring all of their offspring, essentially. That's one of the myths. There's others, good. But not good. No. And it's a cool term. I also have a background in religious studies. I studied Judeo-Christian and Buddhism in college. Judeo-Christian Christian is an outdated term, but I studied monotheistic religions and Buddhism primarily. And Gehenna is a biblical term. It's also a valley in Israel, near Jerusalem, I believe. But it's essentially the field where the biggest battle between demons and angels is supposed to happen in Revelation. So it was kind of like, this is cool. This is very horror themed.
Yeah,
I like it.
right.
Let's do it.
A lot of weight.
And, gaming.
Solid.
Also, with my marketing background, it had to be a name that wasn't taken.
right.
So we had to be able to buy the URL. We had to be able to.
Yep.
So,
Let me
SEO value.
We felt amazing being able to snag Irrational Radio as a name. Like it was So we know the feeling of trying to snag a good name.
It's the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really cool. I like that. It kind of goes to show, especially then in this industry and in this craft of art, you have to apply so many different wide varieties of skill sets to have success or to produce popular content or content that is just fun to interact with. Just the idea of we talked about this on break. We discovered that both me and Ian have philosophy degrees, bachelors in philosophies. So and then we talked about how it's useless except in every situation in life. It's a great way to approach the world, but you're not going to get hired based on your philosophy degree. You might be able to keep a job or, not get fooled by, some kind of rhetoric propaganda, but you're not going to be able to get a job with it. But it just kind of goes to show, no matter what your degree is, I think that you can bring that into role playing. Okay. If you have like a degree in engineering, you can bring that to the table with like comments on architecture or how the narrative eye moves as you're describing things. You can bring those pieces of expertise in, and like your experience in event managing. That is just you wouldn't at the base brush, like how does role playing and event managing have a lot to do with each other, but it's very deeply connected, and we've talked to people that have experience with everything from like electrical engineering to psychology, and how they bring those skills to this craft is really fascinating to watch being applied, because just like your role players, you have no idea how someone is using what they know to elevate what we're doing. And thank you very much for bringing your perspective on everything to table 13, to the table.
Wow, absolutely. I'm happy to be here. It's been a great conversation.
Stuff.
Yeah. So we're now at the point where we kind of like to bring the audience in. If anyone has any questions for us or Ian here, we can take them.
Oh no.
I know
some of these people. I'm worried about the questions they're going to ask me.
This is why we like doing this. It's kind of like a surprise hot seat. But if not, we can keep talking about using strange skill sets to influence your ability to be a DM. What's your take on voices? Are voices super necessary in a as a DM? We lost the stream. My internet, my internet conked out. Yep.
Oh my god. The time.
I had my internet drop out 4 times during an actual play once.
Yep. It's weird. It's like it's OBS just says it's not transmitting, but I'm definitely still connected to Zoom. So just gotta wait for it to kick back on. There we go. And it's back. And we're back. Sorry about that, everybody. So the internet's the large collection of tubes. They just get clogged sometimes. And
if they watch our channel, they're more than familiar with my eternal fight with Comcast, so it's fine.
Yep. It's an eternal war. So we were talking about using strange skill sets and applying them to the craft of D&D. And I had a great question, and now it's gone because we started talking about the internet.
We did.
Yeah.
You half-assed it, and I was like,
voices. That's right, voices.
Oh, yeah,
yes,
voices.
Yes. What is your background? Because this is a strange, like, soft spot for DMs, or like sticking issue, is like how you make NPCs differentiated from one another, and as well, like how to do good believable female characters. That's something that I have trouble with a lot too.
Yes. I've actually talked about this extensively before. So
Well, here you go. Yeah,
I'm bad at voices. Awful at them.
me too.
Unless I'm swearing, I can do an Irish accent. Only when cursing. And I can do a bad Russian gangster accent.
Nice, okay.
This is mostly just from watching like John Wick movies. But
Nice.
other than I can't do accents other than those two. And I can kind of roll into an Irish one if I practice a little bit before going into it, but that's it. Like I'm a trained singer, so changing my pitch and my tone is very easy. So I can like shift my voice around to do like kids or women, or like a gruff voice, or like scream like a demon if I really want to, but I won't do it because of my OBS and pitching and things like that.
It'll shut you off. You just scream
I'm
too
a
much.
metal singer, so
Oh, okay.
that's easy. Doing accents and things I don't do. But more important than voices, and this is what I always tell people when they're like, I can't do voices. I'm like, rather than try to do a voice to immerse your characters in the NPC, think about speech patterns. Think about how, can you do a lisp? Can you stutter? Can you change your cadence so that you kind of talk like Christopher Walken, but but more seriously, like changing those things while still talking in your normal voice is still a voice. Also, think about the character. Think about how they would dress. Think about how they would hold themselves, body language. That will actually be more immersive than like suddenly switching into a Boston accent and talking like Groucho Marx, or talking like Groucho Marx. Like that's actually more immersive to me, at least. Because especially at a table, body language actually conveys more communication than a voice does. Via Zoom and stuff, it's a lot harder, but it's still possible.
Right.
The second part of your question is actually an interesting one, because I used to be like, I am fucking terrible at role-playing women. And then everyone vehemently disagreed with me, and I was like, I don't even remember the last time I did. And they started citing examples, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're people.
Right.
Women are people. You don't have to play them any differently than you play a guy. And that's why I didn't even think about it. I was like, I'm just playing like I have trouble playing romance because it's just not my thing. Like I'm kind of prudish, I guess. Like I only my wife starts laughing. I'm only romantic towards her. So like playing like a sultry woman or sultry man and like trying to seduce a player at a table isn't really my thing. But I can do it. I can like make my voice a little smokier and like talk to someone. Thanks, dear. But
make your voice smoky for me.
Yeah.
Let me just move a little closer to the mic, and we'll make it a little more ASMR.
Yeah.
No, but
Frank the sultry.
that's more my NPR voice. But no, you could like. I'm apparently good at it, but it's just because like I don't think of it as playing a woman. I just think of it it's just a different character. They're just people. Women are women. Like women are people. They're humans. We're all people. It's not hard. I've played non-binary characters, no problem.
Right.
But when I thought about it, I was like, oh, I'm terrible at playing women.
I
Apparently
suppose
I'm not.
I don't say myself as bad at playing like the female gender. I have trouble differentiating female voices. That is my because I only have like one girl voice. Or at least I feel like that. And yeah, and I have trouble like
Same
distinguishing.
philosophy, kind of.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess there is that
exactly.
you
Yep.
just then use whatever regular.
Just
I think
change the
that's like
cadence.
that
Yeah.
is something that's like, oh yeah, duh. Like it's like to say she says,
Right.
and then go into your whatever line it is
Continue.
you're gonna
Yeah.
do.
Yep.
And
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Matt
the
is
other voice
asking
works
me
just
to
as well.
demonstrate my creepy child voice.
I heard
Oh,
that.
please,
By all
yes,
means,
yes.
if you're willing.
Hold on, I got to think about it. I got to get in character a little bit. But what do you mean, Mr. Withers? Where did all the puppies go? I don't know. So, I mean,
Nice.
it's
It's
not.
not like innocent, like
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
like creepy
But-
innocent.
Suspicious. Yeah. It's like, oh.
So
wow.
that came up because I was running a 10 Candles game, and the players decided that they were worshiping one of the players' little brothers as like their god. So I
Oh.
had to play, and then like after another round, the new truth they introduced was the kid knows it, and I'm like, so this kid is like the Antichrist, okay?
Oh man.
So I had
That's
to start
awesome.
playing this kid creepier and creepier. It was amazing. It was so much fun. But yeah, what a touch of you said, who's a GM who works with us, and she's fantastic. She runs amazing games. Voices aren't how you convey characters. Body language, word choice, changing the cadence of your speaking, changing your speaking patterns. If you are conscious of it, like I talk with my hands a lot. Not being a little more stoic, being a little like
Mhm.
notice when I was doing the child voice, like I had that head tilt and I like didn't blink as much. Things like that.
Mhm.
That
definitely
helps
to put
convey
you in that spot.
Yeah.
yes,
For sure. Yeah.
but it also helps convey it to the players and the people
Mhm.
watching.
Yeah.
Right.
As
I
someone
seem
who,
much creepier doing it.
well, I mean,
'Cause I'm
you're
always creepy.
it's bringing it the character across. Since I usually have done, like online, I adopt those body languages things just on accident. I'm not, when I'm doing Steinar or Siggy, they're from the north. I like kind of hunch my back a little bit, and if it's like Jeffrey, our wonderful halfling, he's a sidekick. That's his class. But yeah,
That's
it's
generous.
it's very very good points, and I need to be more conscious of those things because then I can control them rather than just like this is the posture that I've adopted for this character because it was what I was adopting when I first came up with the like it's almost like a blueprint that I've saved. But as someone who doesn't have any acting experience or voiceover work or anything like that, I'm only a English major. I was taught how to bring across voice on a page, not with my pipes. So it's a little bit more difficult to get out of that. Oh, if I can't do this accent, I'm not going to be able to bring this character across the way I want, and rather focus on other aspects of what make people people than just how they sound.
I think Kyron focuses a lot on word choice. You
Yeah.
like your
That's good, too.
what was it? Sticky steps.
Stick steps.
Stick steps,
Yeah,
yeah.
just describe a
Like
ladder
characters
using
like
stick
that
steps.
that use these
Yeah.
weird like sub languages or weird mannerisms and things like that you sort of portray. Your voices are trash.
Just
But-
so bad. Yep, they're just so bad.
They do
That's
well
actually-
on a cartoon, though. That's
Right,
Like, I say
yeah,
every
it's-
time, like you could see it
Nice.
on any anime, like kids pro. It'd be
Nice.
like, "Yep,
I
Like,
think that's one of the things that helped me portray children is thinking about how children describe things when they don't know the word for it,
yeah,
It's a
and
That's a
good.
big
changing
thing.
the language you use,
Yeah.
just changing your dictionary or your
Mhm.
vocabulary. That's
Yeah.
the word. Changing your vocabulary as you're talking for different characters. Thinking about one thing I've done because I can't do accents well when I'm trying to do someone, trying to portray someone who may be from like Spain or something. I think about how their use of the English language changes. I'm lucky enough where I work with really diverse teams in my day job. I work with a lot of Romanians and Ukrainians and people who live in Europe, across Europe. So I'm bombarded by that. Like the language, the vocabulary they use is slightly different because of how they interpret English internally, and they have to translate as we're having a conversation. So I get to pick up on a lot of those patterns, which
That's
is
awesome.
very useful for what I do.
Sort of how they arrange the words.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay.
The way that we say going to the store, but they might say, this is a bad example because they don't actually say this, but like to the store going. Anyway, if you think about how you learned languages in high school, like,
Right.
the order of operations of the sentence is
Right.
different in other languages, and then they have to translate English, and that affects how they speak.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that's
the thing.
we had a large part. I work in news. There's a large part of it that's Spanish speaking news. There's more people who were like Central and South America that I was exposed to, but that were Spanish speaking. But a couple Spanish, and that's it's the sentence formulation stuff. It's just like slightly different, like arranging of words. Sometimes verbs get like put in like kind of different spots, and I think that's definitely one of the things I struggle with as a DM, to like differentiate between characters super well sometimes. So I just lean on accents, but then you end up with like a German dude in the middle of Iowa for some reason because I just
I did not.
four
Yeah.
voices.
I mean, America is the melting pot.
Yeah,
Sure,
right.
but it's like
Yeah.
What's
just
your name?
one thing
Wands?
to continue on that tangent, one thing I will say is interesting is that working with Romanians, their sentence structure is very interesting because Romanian is one of the most similar languages to English.
Oh, interesting.
So their sentence structure is very interesting to analyze as someone who's just fascinated by linguistics and also thinking about it in this context. It's like, I was an interesting choice of words. And I get distracted by it because ADHD. So I'll be like in a business meeting and someone will say something and I'm like, oh, you're asking me a question. Hold on.
I'm sorry, what?
You now, yeah.
Give me a
but
second here. I'll be right back with you now. Yeah, that's super funny.
Voices, but to your actual question, like voices is the thing I always I tell people, so don't.
Okay.
You don't have to use voices to be a good GM. Like people get it's the Matt Mercer effect.
Yes.
Right. I know Critical Role's like on tonight, but fuck them. No, it's awesome. Apparently, they included a combat wheelchair in tonight's episode. I was seeing people tweet about, which is fucking badass. So
that is
very cool.
Badass.
Yeah.
No, they're fantastic, but it's hard to compete. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry,
yeah. Exactly.
cut you off there.
Yeah. He's a trained voice actor, though. Like you're not gonna
with a production team, and
you're not gonna capture that style of acting as a storyteller unless you have that type of training. I don't have that type of training. I think I'm a good GM in general, but like, I don't have that.
Right.
And you don't have to. You can tell a good story without voice acting or getting into costume or I don't know.
Right.
It's like people overthink it essentially.
Yeah. Right.
Well, it is a little bit past midnight. I am 4 minutes into a pumpkin. That's an inside joke. Yeah, I turn into a pumpkin at midnight.
We're in 4 minutes into being a pumpkin.
I'm already 4 minutes into being a pumpkin. I just got vines coming up my leg.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Kyron's pumpkin form is very similar to his human form.
Right. Yes. It's you just cut me open is when the actual differences start becoming relevant. But so thank you very much, Ian, for coming on the show, answering some of our questions, chatting with us, laughing with us about the magic that is role playing and tabletop gaming in general. Again, you can find Gehenna Gaming at gehennagaming.com. And I assume you can find your way to the Discord there as well, correct?
There's a link at the bottom, or you can you can go to any of our social media channels, and there's going to be a link there. If you go to twitch.tv/Gehenna Gaming, there's a Discord icon. Just Google Gehenna Gaming. We will come up.
That is what that's how I found you guys to prepare for this interview. So it'll work. And again, we are Irrational Radio. We do things like Dragons of Paralandia every other week. We do this every week on Thursdays, where we talk about the wonderful DMing art form across multiple platforms, as well as interview very interesting people such as yourself, Ian. Thank you again for coming on the show. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add before we take off?
Wear a mask.
Oh yes,
I
wear a
didn't
mask,
say this
please.
at break,
Don't go
but
outside.
I wanted.
Don't go outside.
There were we have people. We have people in the chat that are in this game, and I didn't say we do it every other Tuesday. We do the Four Orphans of the Apocalypse game, so check that out as well.
Yes.
I apologize for not
We always miss
not
something.
highlighting it.
Always. Yep.
Briefly,
We need to just make a stream schedule and just say you can find our stream schedule below,
You should
and
do
then
that.
we wouldn't
That's
have
what we
to
do.
do all of that.
There you go.
Right.
If I may promote something, actually,
please.
this Saturday, Halloween, I am running a charity one-shot of a modern Call of Cthulhu game inspired by my favorite podcast, the Magnus Archives. We have a all-star cast of players. Alex Ward and Cynthia Marie from LA by Night, Jacob Burgess and Ellie Collins from ATL by Night. And we are going to be raising money for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund throughout that game. So people want to help us out or watch a really awesome cast of players run circles around me as a GM. That'll be Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern, so awesome. 7 p.m. Central.
Very cool.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much, and thank you everybody who watched the stream. We enjoyed having everybody, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.